Kind of
Hey,
scared
how
me
are you?
to try.
Hey, how are you?
This is making me freak out.
I, Josh Jackson, editor of Paste Magazine, president of Paste Media, hereby request that my fellow Josh Ovalle, for collaboration with the Internet is Dead podcast. Please, Josh, be a guest on this podcast. I was just a guest on this podcast.
Hi,
Hi.
Hey, guys.
how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I've been seeing the we've both been watching online the like Camila
Oh.
Cabello like a whole thing with paste and it's crazy.
Yeah, we went through it once with Taylor Swift, and we probably should have hidden the writer's name this time as well. It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Those pop stands, man, they do not take
Yeah.
kindly to criticism.
Was it the
No, it was
same thing?
insane.
Was it the same thing with Taylor Swift where it was like writing like a negative review of her album and then like
Yeah,
is that
except
what
that one
happened?
was like times 10, times
Mm.
100.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Was
were
that one that Matt did?
we are not disclosing.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Pretty sure I remember seeing that on Twitter too. That is like really funny. It was also funny because I had just met like Leah. I met her like at like a house show in Philly and she's like, I have the old thing that you used to do. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And then I was like looking at what she was writing for Paste, and then that came out and I was like, oh God, this is not gonna be good.
Yeah, some really hateful stuff thrown her way. It's yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
you gotta know what you're getting into when you criticize anyone with a following.
No, it's interesting that people's fans care that much about just like one person's like written review. Welcome back everyone to the Internet is Dead podcast. Today we're joined by Josh Jackson, founder and editor-in-chief of Paste Magazine. Um, I interned for Paste. Josh gave me a job and interviewed me as an intern, and it was like a really awesome experience. Probably like the most valuable experience that I've like had in work. I feel like I wouldn't even have made this like podcast if I hadn't had that experience and like gotten like comfortable with interviewing.
I love that we're
Yeah.
full circle now because we probably started on a Zoom call like this. And
Yeah.
Aw.
No, yeah, the
Wait,
first
that's sweet.
interview. Me and Samira are trying to bring back journalism, read alive, you know? Yeah, so just to start off, could you give people just like a background of how you started Paste and what drove you to do it? I know you explained a lot of it to me and Samira when we saw you in person before, but I just think like it's really fascinating to see how something gets built up and also just like kind of the success story behind a thing.
yeah. I mean, it was just really a bunch of friends in our 20s wanting to figure out some way, we loved music. We wanted to get involved in the industry. We had a lot of friends who were musicians. We wanted to figure out a way to help them succeed and, just be able to kind of make a living doing the stuff that we thought they were brilliant at. So we started really with just an online a site where we were selling CDs and cross promoting the bands that we loved, and that sort of grew into writing a lot about these bands. And then I was a journalism major, I was a magazines major, and always
Mm.
loved magazines. And we just decided to take the plunge and start a little print magazine out of Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, it kind of hit a nerve with people, and took off from there. So that was 2002 when we launched the magazine. 2010 we moved everything online, and yeah, it's hard to believe that I've been doing the same thing now for 22 years.
What did it like look like when you started in 2002 and it was just a print magazine? What did that kind of look like day to day?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything was, it's just such a different schedule because we were working on a magazine months ahead of time. So we had the advanced CDs from the artists, and everybody had these long lead times because you had to send it off to a printer like 6 weeks before it was going to be on the newsstand. And So the
Miss
day
that.
to
That's so
day,
cool.
I know
the
that
day to
sounds,
day
yeah.
was so different, but it also gave you the time to like do these long form features and send somebody out on a bus with a band, and it was a I loved that part of it. And I also loved for print, the other thing I loved about it was that you really could curate the experience for the reader. Like you weren't trying to figure out what are people going to click on. You were like,
Mhm.
what total package can we deliver that people are going to go and discover something new that they love? So it really, it felt like we had the ability to break bands. We'd put them on every issue came with a CD, and so we could create these little basically mixtapes for, uh, tens of thousands of people. And at the peak, more than 100, we were printing up to 200,000 copies. And so, that's 200,000 CDs out there with some young band on there that we loved and that
Oh,
might find an audience through that. So yeah, so it
Mhm.
was fun. I miss print in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of things that the immediacy of online is kind of nice too.
How
yeah.
many people were like, how many friends of yours had you started it with? Was it just you and like another person or?
So we started the store. There were three of us, and then two of us were still around when we started the print magazine, and we
Mhm.
brought on another friend of mine right as we were starting the print magazine. And so yeah, the three of us at the beginning of that. But yeah, I mean, and lots of friends involved in so many different ways over the course of years. So yeah, it's um yeah, that piece of it's been fun too.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's so cool because it's like a lot of the time it's hard to realize when something's in its full form and it's grown into something really big that it just started with someone starting it. So like hearing what you actually did to start the thing is like so interesting. And it's also funny because I had like a friend in like school when like was interning whose dad was like, "Oh yeah, I used to like read this magazine when it was in print." And it was such like a weird thing to be like, "Oh, this was like not just like what like journalism is now. Like it was like a thing before this."
Yeah, I mean, we started it. We had no money. We had no idea what we were doing. No, not even really great contacts within the industry or anything like that. We just wanted to make something that we would want to read. And yeah, so it was fun to go from that to this being a real thing that people were selling and Barnes and Noble and, and grocery, we'd see it in grocery stores and airports, and just seeing it out in the world was crazy. But yeah, it has had many different lives over the course of the last couple decades.
I know you mentioned this kind of how you did journalism in college and magazines specifically. But I'm curious to know just kind of what your career journey looked like before like starting Pace with your friends, like if that was the first thing, like first kind of job, I guess, that you started.
No,
Um,
no, I mean, I was working as a communications director for a nonprofit out of college. So I was getting I was working on our publications and communications, but it was a very different thing. It was, um,
yeah.
medical work in developing countries. So yeah, to go from that to music magazine, entertainment magazine was a little bit of a leap. But that's what I was writing about it when I was in college. I was doing the arts and entertainment section for the University of Georgia's newspaper, and
Hmm.
um, a friend and a friend had started his own little magazine, and I was helping him with that. That's my friend who I brought back on to help us too. So, we were in the music scene in Athens, and I was used to that. So that was coming back to entertainment journalism for me.
Do you feel like that experience as a communications director, like looking back on it now, do you feel like it was helpful with like what you ended up doing, or do you feel like you learned anything
Yeah,
like
yeah,
from
because
there?
I mean, I was a communications director. It was a small organization, so I was a communications department of one. Um, so yeah, I was having to put everything together, work with volunteer writers and photographers, and just But also, you know, putting together publications and doing we did a one-off magazine, and so it was yes, I think it was very much helpful in just developing what was good storytelling, and I got to travel all over the world telling incredible stories from different people. I think really everything that came before helped prepare me to do. I mean, nothing could have really prepared me because there was so much that we had to figure out from a business perspective, from a organizational perspective, from working with publicists and writers and illustrators and photographers and all of that, and making it a cohesive whole.
I feel like it was really hard to get that off the ground initially. Like, did it take a lot of kind of like throwing like in just like into the air and like it not being like caught on for a while? Like, do you feel like you kind of had to push through a certain phase of like
Yeah,
working towards it?
we 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 were fortunate that it did seem to catch on pretty quick. That we got the first. It was kind of crazy, I went out and found us a distributor, and that distributor happened to be taking a meeting with the old um, Borders bookstore, and
Oh, I loved Borders.
yeah, we had like just like a single sheet of paper that had like a fake cover on it and showed who was going to be on that first CD. Somehow we got Wilco to say yes on that first CD. That was huge. I don't think there was anything official signed. I think it was an email from their manager just saying it's a go on Wilco, and we took that to mean, okay, well, we're going to stick this song on this, on this. So we just had a list of like some of the artists that were going to be in that first CD or in that first issue, and the buyer from Borders was like, well, this looks like everything that like this is our audience that you're speaking to. And so they agreed to put it in all their stores, and then all of a sudden, like, we could tell that to advertisers that, oh, we're going to be in in all the Borders bookstore. It just, all of a sudden, it felt like this real thing before we had printed that first issue. And we had subscribers who are, the customers from the retail site that we'd put together that trusted us to just, sure, we'll send you a check for $26 or whatever it was. And we used that to print the first issue. I mean, like, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So that, it did come together pretty quick, but it I said that piece of it, the response was pretty immediate, but oh my God, it was so much work. Like, we had rented a little one-room office in downtown Decatur, Georgia, and I would I would leave at like 5 in the morning and come back at like 9 a.m. Like sleep for a few hours and then just get back to it, because you know, between one of my partners and I, we wrote probably 2/3 that first issue. I was doing layout in those early days. We were doing it all. Like, it. I had quit my job in April, and by July we had a finished product. So yeah, it was a little crazy, those early days.
It's so cool that like in the beginning you were literally just like doing it by hand and like writing everything like mostly like between you and your partner. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know a lot of freelance, like
Yeah.
we had some folks that had we'd connected with, and spread the work out. But yeah, it was a lot. I mean, I don't know how many features of that first issue I wrote, but it was multiple. Yeah, it was fun. That's a part of it I don't get to do as much these days. I'm not doing tons of features. I just don't have time.
Is it like a weird thing to like transition from, because you said how you were like also like doing layout for like the first couple of ones too, like to then like now like have like an entire team, and it's like just like it's like so much bigger now than what it is? Was that like a weird transition at all? Or
I
like,
felt like in
yeah.
those early days, I would just continuously like cut my job and hire somebody and cut my job in half. So yeah, and then, you know, but I was always the editorial side and my partner was the publishing side. But then in 2013, he left to go start a brewery. You know,
Yeah.
not
Cool.
a bad thing to have your
Nice.
friend go do. I still go there every Friday.
Aw,
Aw.
that's sweet.
But so I had to take on the business side too, which, you know, which is fine. My brain had always worked a little bit on that side
Mm.
as well. I was always interested in that side, but yeah, some days it's less fun. But yeah, so that was almost the opposite, where I was taking on more stuff that I hadn't done before, and um, you know, just learning that side, and that's mostly what I spend my time on these days. You know, I try to stay involved in editorial, but you know, and there's been times where I've been like, okay, well, I'm gonna take back on the music section because I know, you know, I know that, and I don't have to do that. And we've got a great music editor that you've worked with, and
Mm.
I don't have to do that anymore. So yeah, you know, I dip my toe in the editorial side. We've got a lot of great section editors that run their sections well, and um, you know, that's freed me up to think about how do we actually keep this going and be stable and grow, and you know, now take on other sites and try to make all those work.
What you were saying about like it picking up right away is really interesting to just like see something that you made just immediately kind of like come to fruition. But also it's interesting like to think about because do you think that kind of picked up through word of mouth mostly? Because it was like so different from what journalism is now with like where word of mouth isn't like that takes a while to build up around something online because it's like a
Yeah.
lot harder for that to just like for there to be a common like music publication and people to all like know that one publication.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think there was certainly a lot of word of mouth. I think you know, the difference back then is we had a presence in a store that people were going to. And so people were perusing the magazine rack, and they would
Mm,
see this new thing that had artists that they cared about on the cover, and flipped it open, and you know, had everything from Arrested Development to Wilco. And, you know, have people would have that CD and play. It would be like, check this out, and you know, and somebody's in their car and they're listening to. Yeah, so I do think word of mouth played a huge role early on. So you know, we had a website back then too. You know, like we put stuff
mm,
online, and people found us that way too. But yeah, the first 8 years when we were in print, the print magazine definitely had a bigger impact out there than the website did. Yeah, so it was a transition to when we went out of print to like, okay, now everybody come check us out online, and all the
mm.
new things that we get to do because we don't have to worry about how much space is in how many
Yeah.
page counts and things like that. We can cover all the stuff that we want to do and go deeper into to
Mm,
movies, and really cover TV in a way that we couldn't in the magazine, because with the 6 week lead time, we didn't
mm.
have we couldn't talk about what was on TV last week.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy that like I don't think a lot of people realize how close like the transition from print to digital is when for a lot of people, especially people my age, most of what they've seen has been digital. And like I know when I was a kid, I'd be like in like stores buying like magazines and like with like pop culture on them, but like that slowly like became like so unimportant as soon as the internet became important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for us, you know, the kind of beginning of the end for us was 2008, the recession. All of a sudden, all of our advertising dried up, and we were very much ad supported, and
Mm,
we, you know, we were not a big company that could withstand that. So um, we thought maybe that was the end, and we did basically, before there was Kickstarter, we did a Save Pace campaign and raised $250,000 from people giving money, and you know, like a bunch of artists basically donated tracks for, and we had this like 80 song
aw.
playlist that you could download just give us, you know, whatever you wanted to give. So many different artists donated to that and gave a track, you know, gave a song to be on that track. A lot of it was like unreleased stuff,
Mhm.
and that really kept us going for 2 more years. But yeah, everything was changing, and it just wasn't ever gonna keep going in print. But
Mhm.
yeah, we
Wow.
lasted longer than we would have otherwise. So that was really kind of amazing to see the response that people cared.
Were you like
Yeah.
afraid in that time period when you had to kind of do the like, oh, save paste campaign and have people donate? Like, did it feel really like high pressure considering like this is a thing you built and if it just
Yeah,
if people don't care, they like it'll just disappear.
yeah, no, I mean we had to decide, do we just hang it up now and just, you know, quietly go away with dignity, or do we like try to cling on and keep, you know, and fight and try to keep making this thing work? And we decided we would just try to make this thing work. And it, you know, it was hard. You know, and when we did shut down print, you know, people lost jobs, and, you know, we had layoffs, and that sucks. You know, like you
Mm.
feel totally responsible for having failed people. And so yeah, that, you know, yes, worried, yes, all the time. You know, you don't ever really stop when you've got people relying on you. You know, you want it to work, you want it to grow, you want to be um, giving more people opportunities to do what they love, and you know, just making sure that everybody keeps their health insurance and all that stuff. So yeah, no, it's yeah.
That is a really like cool thing though to just like see all of these artists and see this community that you've built around this like music magazine, then all coming together and supporting it in this really insane way. Like that's just like a really, really sweet thing to witness, I feel like.
Like, you know, you created that. Like
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Thanks for saying it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I feel so fortunate that I've gotten to do this for 2 decades, and I've loved it. And you know, it's so fun working with creative people and seeing the amazing stuff that they come up with. You know, there's just new ideas all the time. And, you know, we always used to say we want to surprise and delight our audience. And that's a fun thing. That's a fun goal to have. And you know, involve lots of people in, and like you say, create that community.
Mm.
And now it's weird because for so long it's always been this thing that you know, that I helped create. But now I'm also responsible for these things that other people created and
Yeah.
that are beloved and have their own
Hmm.
communities. And that's a different kind of responsibility, feeling. You know, that I want Jezebel to thrive, and I want the AV Club to thrive, and I want Splinter to thrive, and you know, the people who love those sites, I want them to feel like, oh, these sites are back. They're you know, alive, and um, that the thing that I always loved about it is still there, and it's doing new things, and taking, you know, and you know, continuing to surprise and delight in their own way. So
Mm.
yeah, that's been a fun and very new challenge.
No,
Yeah.
seeing that like article in like the New York Times, I think it was so like exciting because I was like, yeah, that's Josh Jackson, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I wanted to say like congrats about acquiring Jezebel, the AV Club, and Splinter. Um, I was also really curious about what the process like actually looks like for like bringing on like just like three new publications. Because I feel like it's a hard thing for people to imagine from the outside and understand what that actually looks like and means for you and how it affects the writers too.
Yeah, you know, we're almost through this process with AV Club, and that will have sort of finished what basically has taken up my last 8 months. So yeah, with Jezebel, it was you know, finding out that it had closed was the beginning of that process, because, you know, we had, you know, gotten a deck, you know, from Geo, who owned all these properties a long time ago, but nothing had ever really come of it. And Jezebel was not really what had piqued my interest there. You know, I didn't see myself as somehow knowing how to, you know, keep that site going or revive that site. But when they shut down, it was definitely a site I loved and respected, and couldn't imagine not being there. So when that had shut down, they had already laid off all their staff. And Splinter had been shut down for years. That was there weren't even any images on the site. It was not a live site for a very long time. So, you know, we inquired about, okay, well, what would it take to, you know, get the site, and then, you know, it was okay, well, now we need somebody to run it. Now we need to, you know, um, see if, you know, who on the staff wants to come back, you know, like who's still interested in doing this. And we were fortunate to be able to bring back the the person who was running it when it got shut down, who Lauren Toussaint, who's fantastic, and a couple of her staffers there that are also fantastic, and a lot of the former staff wanted to contribute as freelancers, and so, you know, we've still got the amazing reporting of Susan Rinkunis, and, you know, and so many others. I mean, so too many to name, but yeah, so you know, my job as I see it is to just give them the space to make Jezebel the best version of Jezebel that it can be. And, you know, to take off, you know, I think things, you know, things were run a little differently by the previous company, and I think giving the editor and the writers a little more freedom to pursue the stories that they think that the readers will care about, you know, is starting to pay off. And so, you know, that was the process there. And then it's, you know, it's a matter of we bought the website and all the content, but not the platform that it was on. So we had to move everything off. We basically had to rebuild the website from scratch. So we've been, you know, we've done that with Jezebel and Splinter, and are in the process of doing that with AV Club, so we can move it off of its platform, and bring back some of the old fantastic writers who, you know, were forced out when AV Club left Chicago. And we did our first. They hadn't done any AV undercover filming in 7 years, so we just did our first ones of those. So those will be going on, you know, getting announced soon. It's
Yeah,
so
that's
fun to
cool.
go film those.
Aw.
We did our first day of filming up in New York about a week ago, and yeah, I think people are going to be excited about the first one that goes live.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious, like what the behind the scenes of it like looks like too, because to me, in my head, I'm like Paste Magazine, and I like see a Slack channel in my head, you know? So does it feel like it's just like that times three, kind of like the
Got the
same
Slack
way?
channel open right now. It's a Slack
Yeah.
channel with all of us in it. You know, and there's channels for each specific, you know, property as well. And yeah, that Slack channel is you know, we're all remote. I've certainly adjusted. I don't think I could go back. And I loved having an office. It killed me
Mhm.
when we had to shut down our offices in Atlanta and New York when COVID hit. But you know, we're all so scattered now. I can't, I mean, there's no way we would have another office, maybe a studio
Mm.
at some point, but our studio is remote, and we go kind of where the wind blows us. So we filmed all over the country since COVID hit, and we'll continue to do that. So yeah, that's working for us. I mean, it is,
Mm.
you know, we do a weekly
Yeah, the
um
weekly meeting.
yeah, we're still
Yeah.
doing it. It's just a lot more people on it. Somehow we still keep it to like under 40 minutes. You think
Mm.
about 30 minutes with
Yeah.
everybody getting to talk, but you know, it's just a check in, and check in on our sanity, and that we're not in this alone, and all that thing. And then all the teams, you know, have their own meetings to really go over what's going on. So yeah, it's working. So far so good. It's working for us.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
whenever I like envision working there, I envision like the Slack channel, and I think that's funny because like for a lot of places you would normally just like envision wherever it is like that you were. And that's like a really interesting thing just in general with I think like online working and like especially working at like a publication. All your coworkers are cool. And like I don't know. It was just it's just funny to like think about because I was like, okay, so if there's like three more publications, is the Slack channel just bigger? Like like it's not like you have to go and like get a new like a big office or anything like that,
Yeah,
which
I
is
mean,
so
that's exactly
interesting.
what happened is the Slack channel's just bigger.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I do lament that for particularly for younger folks on staff that have not had that experience in an office. Our office in Atlanta was an open office with bands coming in every day, loud bands. And so,
That's so fun
That
though.
sounds
That's so
so fun.
fun.
Yeah.
super fun, but also
Yeah.
super hard to get your work done. So I loved it because, that was a big part of, uh, my job was, just making everything flow and everything happen. And I'm outgoing and I love being around energy and people. And
Mhm.
it's fun having visitors in the office every day. And then having, our beer tastings and as the day wound down, where, we'd be all these breweries would be sending us beer and we'd do these blind tastings and I mean, that was super fun. There was so much about it. And so many just cool random folks coming in the office. And I think people do enjoy the freedom and the lack of a commute
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all those things. So it's a trade-off. In an ideal
Um,
world, we'd probably have some weird hybrid solution a couple days a week, but
Mm.
if we did that, we would lose the ability to have people in, a dozen different cities.
yeah, it
Really,
does also probably like make it then more special when there is an in-person event or something where everyone gets to like go and then you get to see everyone for the first time and or in a long time and it's just like a really cool thing and it almost makes you more grateful then for having like those moments, I feel like.
yeah, I mean, South
Mhm.
by Southwest this year, I finally met our movies editor, Jacob Aller.
Oh yeah.
He's been with us for a
Uh,
year now. But he came on, he lives in Chicago and came on during COVID. So
Mm.
um yeah, I mean, I still haven't met our TV editor, like in person.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, South by we had, several of us and staying in one Airbnb, and it was fun
Oh,
to,
that's so fun.
spend the
that's really fun.
so yeah, and then I was just up in New York and got to meet some of the AV Club staffers for the first time in New York and see Lauren
Mm.
up there. And
I always think of this because Samira, you told me about this movie, and also I remember like really vividly in like my interview to like be an intern at Pace.
Oh, I
I
know.
was like, "Why did you want to get into journalism?" And I think Matt said that it was because of the movie Almost Famous. And Samira told me about that movie, and I had like watched it super recently to that. And like that movie is such like a funny like I think also just in media in general, like how journalism and music journalism especially is depicted is so interesting and like it's kind of crazy because it kind of was actually like that at a time before there was like this whole like internet like aspect to it. Like people were just going in person and like seeing these people because like how else were you gonna do that? Like you could talk on the phone, but like I don't know. It's just like so interesting that that like used to be how it was. Even when me and Samira came in person to like do the like recording that happened like last summer, it felt so like magical because it's like, oh, this is like what this is like, but in real life. And it's like cool because you're actually doing things with real people. And like, I think you can forget that really easily when you're online for a while.
No, I was just gonna say I was thinking that too when you mentioned earlier, like going on like a bus with like a band or something. I
Yeah.
like thought of Almost Famous
Yeah,
and I
no,
like
same.
forgot to say it. Yeah.
we sent a writer on tour with the Roots to do a big Questlove cover story, and that was super
Well,
fun.
that's
Oh,
cool.
that's so
I got to
fun.
get to travel a couple times to go do stories and me be at dinner with Josh Ritter's parents and like hear them talk about their kid
That's
and
so cool though.
Yeah.
yeah just traveling and meeting people on their terms was super fun. But back to
Mm.
Almost Famous, we did have Ben Fong Torres, who was the editor, the kids editor in the movie.
Mhm.
The he was the Rolling Stone editor, and he wrote for Paste on a few occasions, which was
Oh,
super
that's so
cool.
cool.
Like
Yeah, that's
pulling
really
those
cool.
people in, these old,
Mm.
some of the folks that had been doing it, since the 70s, having them write for us and Paste always was a good time. And so yeah, there was that connection. You know, uh, these writers who had written for Rolling Stone back in the day, or Cream, or you name it, in our pages was uh, always felt cool to get to to tie us to that generation that came before.
I'm curious to know, like, were there any stories that you got to write or just like experiences that you had that were really cool, like looking back on, like either like, yeah, like just any stories or any people
Man,
that you
so
interviewed or
many.
anything?
So many. I mean, one of the ones that always sticks out, just one of the just craziest nights. You know, we started this in Atlanta. This is not the music capital. I mean, it is for hip hop, but it is not for publications. It is, it's not for, I mean, New York was always felt like the center of gravity in our world. And,
Mm.
we hadn't really ever thrown an event in New York, and we decided we were going to throw a party. We'd been doing the magazine for a few years. We'd been working with a lot of these people in the industry in New York that we didn't spend a lot of time with. Everybody, our competitors who were in New York, knew these folks, and we're like, okay, we're gonna throw a party. We'll throw it, it'll be like an issue release party. We'll get some bands to play. And so we didn't know who was gonna play, but we went ahead and sent out the invitation and got all these RSVPs, so we knew people were gonna be there. And on that cover was Beck. And I was like, well, obviously he's going to be my first act. There's no way. He lives in LA. There's no way we can afford him, playing some 400 cap room in New York. And we reached out, and he happened to be doing Saturday Night Live that week. He was
Aw.
about to go
Oh,
on like a small room tour. Like it just was like perfect timing, and it worked out perfectly. So we were able to get Beck to come play. It was just going to be him playing acoustically for 30 minutes, but great. This will be awesome. And we decided not to tell anybody, that we would just, surprise, like, what, why ruin the surprise? Let everybody come in. So we had Questlove DJing somehow the
That's
party.
so cool.
Had a
yeah.
couple opening acts, and then I got to get up on stage and you know uh, co-introduce surprise this room for jaded 400 jaded New Yorkers in the music industry, that these kids from Atlanta and their silly little magazine is bringing Beck on stage. And he ended up showing up with his full band. He played for an hour.
Oh,
All he did was take requests. So he played
Aw.
everything I would want him to play. It was um that was just such a fun night to like feel like, okay, we've arrived. We've made our mark in this, you know, crazy industry. So yeah, so that was a fun night. I mean, there's so many moments like that where it's like, how am I here? How is this real life? And
Aw.
just fun stories to get to tell.
Well, it's so cool that like just hearing you talk about that and being like, okay, like you run this like huge magazine, but like you're still just a fan at heart. And that's really cool.
Oh,
Because I don't think anyone ever stops being a fan, no matter how many like times you like interview someone who you look up to, like it's still gonna be like really cool.
and it's not just that you're interviewing people who are famous, but you're interviewing people whose art has meant something to you and that you've connected with.
Yeah.
And you get
mhm.
to you get to ask them those questions you wanted to ask them when you were just listening. Like it's I probably got less starstruck over time, but
Mm.
never just didn't get giddy to talk to the people, whose art is meaningful. And I still get giddy even if I'm not the one doing it.
Aw.
Matt Mitchell has been on just a tear. We just did a Talking Heads piece, and it's like I can live vicariously through that. That's fine. Like
Aw.
I love him taking it over, and and telling these stories, because he asked the questions I'd want asked. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I love that we get to be just connected to these legends.
Mhm.
Even if I don't have time to go, fly out and do these interviews in person anymore or whatever.
Do you still like write a lot in your free time, considering like how much of your work has to do with journalism? Like, has it jaded you at all?
I love when I get to write. So it hasn't jaded me, but I don't write nearly as much as I used to.
Mm.
It is there's been times recently where I've taken on things and it's felt like it was going to kill me. And so I've gotten to write some travel pieces, which is fun because that's,
Mm.
it is a little bit of what I was doing right out of college. That's what I wanted to do, was travel, like that was sort of
Mhm.
the track I wanted to be on. So I did some of that, but it's been a long time, like that's not the thing that I just did day in and day out with Paste, was writing more about musicians and filmmakers and that kind of thing. But whenever I do, it just feels like I'm gonna die because I didn't have time to take this thing on. And
Yeah.
when do I get this thing written? So yeah, I write a lot less, but um, I still, I'll never stop writing completely.
Mm.
If I were to retire from Paste, I would still want to, that I don't see myself stopping writing before I die, like I hope not. I hope I can always find things to write about.
Kind of wanted to shift a little bit. We talked about it a little bit, but just like how journalism's changed like over the years and the state that it's in now. I'm curious to know like from your perspective how you've seen the field change over time and also just what parts of it you like and what parts you wish were different.
Yeah, I mean the state of journalism has certainly changed. I mean, it's the challenges of running a website like ours have changed. I always say I feel like we've had to change our business model every 3 years. So
Mhm.
that's the making it all work side of things. But the journalism itself, I mean, you know, the I would say particularly talking about music journalists, musicians used to be, um, I think, more accessible in, a different way. It wasn't like you were going to get 30 minutes on the phone and everybody was going to basically get to the same point, and so all the stories started sounding the same.
Yeah.
Mm.
We when we were in print, we could get a lot more creative on how we approached the story, which I miss that a lot. I the 1,000 word feature from a phone call. Um, I don't even enjoy reading those, much less trying to come up with a way to write those.
Mm.
Um, News writing. I feel like there's all of the trades are owned by one company now, and they sort of have a lock on how news is distributed. It's like it's become just an industry and you know, okay, well, somebody just got cast in this movie. Well, is it going to be Variety or Hollywood Reporter that breaks it? And does it
Okay.
matter because it's the same, like,
Yeah.
so, when we look at covering news, the challenge is, not just rehashing what, what got released either through a press release or through whatever, but, giving our spin on it. And, so humor is a big part of what's going to make that be interesting. Having a smart take on it, being able to
Mm.
to to offer some kind of new analysis on it. Those are important things to us. We are, we're downstream from like hard, we try to do original reporting, and it's always good when we can. And I would want to push all of our folks to be doing more of that. But yeah, I mean that's what's going to stand out. And
Mm.
then, just the clever twist on things. I mean, a lot of what we write about is looking back on older stuff. And so what's going to separate our coverage from somebody else's coverage? But yeah, I mean, journalism has definitely changed over the course of us doing this, and it's changed from print to online, and even since we've been online, it's changed. So it's keeping up with all that, and just, you know, the challenge is always, how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we put stuff out there that people are going to want to read? I don't know if they teach you this, taught you guys this, and when you went through journalism school, or if you did, but
we both didn't go to
yeah,
journalism
yeah,
school,
yeah.
so
But you did. What I'm saying is, you didn't miss out on, like there's always the how to write the story, the how to come up with a good story. That is like over 50% of the battle. Coming up with the ideas. You know, somebody who's got good ideas is gonna do well in this industry. And so yeah, I mean, that has not changed. That was true, even if they weren't really hammering that in journalism school when I was in journalism school, or not. I mean, that's always been the thing, is if it's the person, you know, the writer who's coming up with the creative ideas is going to stand out. And then, of course, you know, the other part of it is executing on those ideas, and being able to write with a point of view and a unique voice, and all those things that, you know, um, that's what makes me want to read a story.
yeah.
That it's not the thing that somebody else has already done. It is, you know, it's not the thing that I've seen before, at least. And that it delivers. You know, it's not just a clever headline. I'm not going to regret that I clicked on the title. I mean, that, to me, that's what clickbait always meant. It always felt a little bit like, you know, Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown, like, oh God, they got me again. They got me, you know, and I start, you know, I start distrusting sites that make me regret having clicked on their headline. And so I don't ever want any of our sites to make someone regret that they clicked on that headline. So if the headline's clever, that's awesome. But if we don't follow it up with good content, then that's kind of worthless.
With like how journalism is now and how it's kind of hard for just like journalists to find places where they belong, and just like the field overall kind of being in shambles, like what advice would you give to aspiring journalists looking to start like their own media outlets, or just like find their right place in what they want to do and like just be able to do what they really like?
Yeah, I mean, and the starting your own, I mean, that's sort of the approach I took. And the
Yeah.
thing about doing that is it forces you to do the thing over and over again. So that
Mhm.
there's advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages, you don't have anybody looking over your shoulder to kind of sharpen you and make you better. So, you know, making sure that if you're doing your own thing, you're doing it with people who you trust to edit your stuff, and that you can edit their stuff, and that you can sharpen each other. So maybe a mix of doing that, and then you know, writing for as many different editors as you can, because everybody is gonna help make your writing better, hopefully, if they're a good editor, one way or another.
Mhm.
Um, you know, listening to those folks who, you know, are providing feedback. I mean, it's always hard. It's always hard as a writer to get, you know, something that's just completely marked up. But that's how that's how you learn to get better. The challenge of the number of outlets is a real thing. When I was coming up, you know, I could write for my college paper that was a print edition, and you know, there was the alt weekly in town. There was as things started moving and we were starting Pace, there were a million blogs that people had started, that people were paying attention to, because that's how you found music. You didn't rely on your Spotify playlist. Um, uh, and so yeah, I mean, it's hard that you need the local places, you need the niche blogs, you need all those places so that people can get their start and work their way through, you know, to doing the thing that they love. I mean, we were always a step on that food chain. You know, I look at some of our former writers who are now like on staff at the New Yorker, or like have
Mm,
gone on to do these amazing things. And yeah, so yeah, just finding the thing that you love writing about, because that's the great thing about being a writer is you can combine it with your passions. And that's where you're going to stand out, is the things that you've spent the time getting to know and love. And so write about the things that you're passionate about, find those places where that's a fit. And yeah, just write and write and write and write, because very
mm,
few of us start out being all that great. It takes work. It is a thing that you get better at. I used to think when we started Paste, I was like, well, there's, you either have the talent or you don't. And then I would just see people who came through and just the people that I knew, that I followed their writing back then and see their writing now, and just see how far it's gone and how
mm.
embarrassing my writing was in college. You know, like it takes time and work and putting the
Mm.
hours in.
I feel like I really saw that like approach, like especially what you were describing when you were first just talking about like starting something and doing it over and over. Like I feel like I saw that approach like as being an intern at Pace, because I remember just like being really thrown off because I like ran my own like little like music publication for like Philly, and I had only had interview experience from that really, and like I had been published like a few times in like other stuff, but like I like that was really my like experience of like interviewing people. And I remember getting my first like opportunity to interview someone, and I think it was like Current Joys, and I was like, or no, I think it was Declan McKenna, but I didn't even have like anyone like look at the questions like that I was like using, and I was like super surprised that it was like that free of like I could just like ask what I wanted and like create the story as I wanted, and like just like come at it from like a blank slate of like an approach, which I think is so helpful for people because it like lets you go at something from just who you are as a person.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, as far as interviewing goes, I mean, I think you start with your questions, but it becomes a conversation. I mean, like, this is a conversation. Like, you
Yeah.
ask the questions and you came prepared, but if it's gotta be a conversation, and there's no way to, you know, um, nobody's going to look over your shoulder on how to have a conversation. Like, the
Yeah.
conversation's going to
Yeah.
lead where it leads, and you don't know what the story is going in. So if you come, if we signed off on a certain number of questions and that's what you were supposed to ask, it would be a very awkward interview with weird transit.
Yeah.
Like somebody would say something super meaningful, and then you just go into the next. Like, you don't follow that up back to the. Yeah. So yeah, I know. I do think you've got to have the freedom to be able to have a conversation on your own, and learn from that conversation. Like,
Mhm.
learn. Oh, I should have been prepared in this way that I wasn't. Um, I didn't see the conversation going in that direction, and my knowledge was limited by like, so you learn things that way. But and you learn when you're trying to put it into a story of like, oh, I should have really followed up on this, because the story's going in this direction, but that leaves some stuff unanswered that would have fit this section of the feature.
Mhm.
Like, if you're
Mhm.
turning it into a feature instead of a Q&A or whatever, like, you learn from that, and you know you get
Yeah.
better. But you get better, from everything that you're doing related to it. You get better by hosting a podcast.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
yeah, just like doing that over and over is such like a interesting experience because it's like really what you're doing is just talking and asking someone questions and getting to know them. But it's like such an interesting thing to do like almost in a more structured way, but then at the same time it like obviously takes its own turns. But I don't know, at least like what we what we've been doing, like we've been like interviewing people like at least like once a week for the past few months for like
yeah,
the podcast, and like doing that like does something to your brain, I think.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
I
crazy.
When COVID hit, all of a sudden our podcast stopped because I didn't have a studio to go into so many things changed and I was at home and I decided to do a live daily um uh basically video series that every day at 5 o'clock, we called it Happiest Hour. And instead of having just one guest every day, I decided I was going to have two guests every day. And we were going to all meet in the middle of this, it was an hour-long segment. So it'd be like interview one, then, the second person comes on and the three of us just talk for a minute and raise a glass. And then that person leaves and then interview two. So I did that for
Aw.
like
It's fun.
2 or 3 months, 5 days a week. It was pretty much my whole job. But that was getting thrown into the deep end of interviewing because it was like,
Mm,
you were just, but it was also like saved my soul during COVID because I
Aw.
knew I was going to get to talk to people each day,
yeah.
also isolated and everybody was available because nobody had anything else going on. And so, yeah, it was fun. It was definitely one of those very of the moment things that
Mm,
didn't need to continue, but got me through those first few months of COVID, and hopefully helped other people too, just to know that, okay, well, I can at least hear from some folks
mm,
during
Yeah.
this crazy time. So yeah, but it does do something to your brain because
yeah.
that's intense. Like I had to be prepared for two different people every day, have those conversations, trying to do
Mm.
all the technology that, worked about 60% of the time, like there was
Like
always
building conversation as a skill, like
Yeah.
that's so interesting because I feel like it changes how I have conversations normally now. Like almost adds like a through line, and I'm like, wait, I'm not in an interview. We can just talk. But like I don't know. I think that is very interesting to like just be so aware of like how you're just like even interacting with somebody in an interview.
it makes you a
Yeah.
better listener, just in
Hmm.
Yeah.
life. I would think,
Yeah,
hopefully,
for sure.
I think so.
Yeah. It's like a weird thing of having to balance, like being prepared and having questions, like you said, but then letting it kind of take its own direction and it being a genuine conversation. And I think like that's something that I know, like struggled with a little bit in the beginning and are still trying to figure out how to do because we just want it to come off as genuine as possible, I feel like, and just like it's having an actual conversation. But yeah, I feel like it's like a skill that you definitely build.
Yeah, and I don't think that's intuitive when you're starting out as a journalist.
Hmm.
You see this like reporter interviewee relationship is supposed to be a certain way, whether that's what
Hmm.
on TV, but there's like this separateness thing, and to some extent that's true. I mean, you've got a job to do, they've got a job to do, but it's just so much more interesting when you can have, I mean, it's easier for them. And
Hmm.
so I think you just get better stuff to work with when people are at ease and not just like trying to rattle off bullet points or whatnot.
Hmm. Well, also just like playing so into the role that you are given for like a job or just anything in life, even like mother and like son. Like that is like the same thing. It's like I don't know, you can fall so deeply into a role and you forget that you can like do so much outside of that. And I think it is just like almost about kind of keeping yourself and like walking into something as yourself and not as that role, which is like a hard thing to do when you're still having to accomplish something. Also, we're running out of time, and before we run out of time, I need to ask about because we were talking about this and thought the discourse about it was really interesting about like the reception of that Camila Cabello review that an
Uh,
intern wrote. Um, I just wanted to ask what you thought about it because it's just like interesting watching as someone like from afar,
yeah,
like knowing what the like writing process looks like for something like that. And knowing that this person just like wrote a critique of like of an album. But just like for anyone who doesn't like know who's listening, basically like an intern had tweeted like biased stuff about Camila Cabello prior to like writing a review, and then fans are attacking her in like crazy ways with like anti-Semitic comments. And I just think it's like crazy that the internet works that way. But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious what
I
you think.
think, yeah, I think, I mean, of course, if you're a critic, you want to go into something open-minded, um, to be able to listen to something for what it is and for what it was built. But having tweeted your opinions about a piece of art, that's not a bias. That's just
Yeah.
you're writing a review.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
review, it's an opinion. Our reviews are very much, the opinion of one writer. From the beginning, when we had the print magazine, we called, the tagline for our review section was "Encounters with Art." Like it was like this is one person's encounter with this piece of art and what they got from it. Now
Mm.
we have editors that help sharpen that. We have editors who can adjust the score if we think a score is unfair. Um, I mean, nobody on staff liked that album. I don't think it's a good album. It just is what it is. It's not biased to say that this is a bad album. It's opinion. So,
Mm.
but the attacks were grotesque and awful, and I hate that writers go through that. But we've had writers go through that before. We had a writer years ago go through that with a just a mediocre Taylor Swift. It wasn't even a bad review. It was like I think it was like a 6.5 or something. And I think that was Lover. And got death threats. We had to start locking the office.
Oh,
Like serious
That's
stuff.
insane. Over a Taylor
yeah.
Swift review. Like
That's
what?
so
So this time
scary.
around, we had another bad, like, we have plenty of Taylor Swift fans on staff here. I know who wrote the review, even though they were anonymous, and I know that they have a deep appreciation for Taylor Swift's catalog. Didn't like the album, wrote a negative review, and again, and we didn't even publish the writer's name because we knew what was coming, and it did come. We had, somebody, tweeting the paste office explode. This is the paste office in an hour, and it was an explosion. And like,
Oh my
That's
fortunately, I'm like, we don't have
insane.
an office, thankfully. Nobody knows
Yeah,
my
nowhere for them to target.
we got emails from people wishing cancer, AIDS. There were a few different specific diseases that got wished on the writer of that piece. And it's just like, I get that you like Taylor Swift, but she does not need you as her public defender. Like
Like
Camila
she's
Cabello,
gonna be okay even if there's this
uh,
mediocre review of her.
yeah.
Like,
So yeah, it's weird. It's pop stands particularly. Like,
Mm.
nobody's coming after us for our, M. Night Shyamalan pan or something, like it is, movies don't get the same, it's music
yeah.
critic. You gotta know what you're getting into if you're gonna pan an album.
And because I guess it's like always kind of been that way a little bit where journalists have been like attacked in a personal way for like reviewing something or saying something and then being critiqued on it. But obviously the internet's like made that an
Yeah,
insane,
I
like
know.
exponential thing.
We
And
Well,
had
fan
plenty.
culture
yeah,
too.
It's
yeah,
changed. Fan culture has changed. There was
yeah.
like, we gave plenty of bad reviews and paste, and when um when we were in print, nobody was coming after me for panning Train back in 2006 or whatever.
Hmm.
Like we didn't even get hate mail from bad reviews. We might
Yeah.
we might get disagreement. We might get people that, and we'd publish it. Like we had a letter section that was always fun. Right now we have comments section. So if you don't like it, you can leave your comments. Just
Hmm.
don't be a bigot, don't be an ass. And you have a place for your opinion to be heard. So yeah, no need for the death threats, no need for the hate. You can leave your own little mini review in the comments section if you like. It
Yeah.
seems like that would be enough. Like there's a serious desire to hurt, whether that's through doxing or through
Mm.
whatever, like the people we don't agree with, which is it's kind of where our culture is right now. Music criticism is a small part of it. I think it's worse in games, you know. Fortunately, we haven't experienced that as much, but you know, I know it's tough to be a games journalist and sometimes
Yeah.
too.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I think like also a lot of the reason people think it's okay is because like fan culture has perpetuated this kind of hatefulness that became really like desensitized within like the internet. And I think it's just very interesting to see like especially like I just like thought it was funny because I was like this is over a Camila Cabello album and it's just so funny like it's not funny but it's like people are ridiculous.
I think there's a community aspect of it which could be healthy. Like you know, you have this fandom and these, you know, I mean, for me, I was on, you know, when I moved away from my hometown and was keeping up with a lot of friends on you know, message boards for bands that I loved. You know, like it
Yeah.
was a place for community. But I think there's like uh something toxic about people cheering each other on for the hatefulness.
It happening with Camila was so funny to me because I was like in her fan communities when I was younger and like followed her so much. So then I was like, oh my God, Paste and Camila at war. Like it was just like really funny. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, well, there are also like what you said about pop stands, and then there's like specific fandoms I think that just have that intent, like insane, like I don't even know what it is, like Taylor Swift, and then
Like cult
Camilla, yeah,
followings kind
like
of.
cult followings, yeah,
Yeah.
which it's like, yeah, if you
Yeah,
say
and
one bad thing, it's like over.
well, I think an important thing for us, and I'm not saying that there's sites out there that are necessarily doing this, but it's something that we, you know, we're never gonna, you know, not pan a Taylor Swift album that we think is bad because then we think we're not going to get tickets to the next Taylor Swift show, or we're not going to get access to a Taylor Swift interview, or get Taylor Swift to come do you know, a pay session or whatever. Like that's how we've always treated things. So I've had artists that were on, we had a label back in the day, and artists that were on our label that got a mediocre review, and then I have to like hear from that, you know, like I'm like, hey, this is independent. This is what the reviewer said, you know, like I'm not, because I have a friendship with you, gonna protect that. And it's an awkward position to be in, and it's uncomfortable, but it is, you know, if we're gonna have an independent voice and we're gonna be trustworthy, we've got to be able to really, you know, give our honest, unvarnished opinion, no matter where that puts us. If we're out of line with a Metacritic score, or where, you know, like we can't ever let any of that affect how we respond to things. Or the next time that we tell you that Taylor Swift put out the best album that she's ever put out, you know, we want to be trusted. We want that trust. So, um, you know, I think that's the uh, I think that's the norm in music journalism. You know, I think there's occasional outliers, and you know, it sucks when you see it, but I think that's the way that most people operate, and that's the way that we've always operated. So yeah, yeah, I mean, I'm not to say that, hey, we're, you know, our job is to make Taylor Swift better, but if that's a side, you're all welcome.
Right about a time, but thank you so much for coming on. It's really fun to
Absolutely, this
talk
has
about
been
all of this and
fun.
Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Just one last thing. I don't know if you saw this, if you like clicked on our account or anything, but our podcast is called The Internet is Dead, but it's also called the Josh Ovalle Please Be a Guest on My Podcast. So we're getting all of our guests read this thing with the goal of getting him on, being like, hey, like here's my power. Like I run Pace Magazine. Can you come on the Internet is Dead podcast? So can we just like tell you a thing to read out loud?
Yeah,
Cool. And then state your name, then any credentials that you have. So like I run
we
Pace
have. Can you put this in
Magazine.
the
In the
chat?
chat, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me just read this so I don't have to be looking at it. Read it.
You don't
Okay.
have to read what's in the parentheses, the part where we're like, and
Yeah.
then if like any credentials.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right. I, Josh Jackson, editor of Paste Magazine, president of Paste Media, hereby request that my fellow Josh Ovalle, for collaboration with the Internet is Dead podcast. Please, Josh, be a guest on this podcast. I was just a guest on this podcast. Miss you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.